Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're focusing our attention on one of the most famous figures in American history, but we're going to look at him through a completely different lens. Every January, you know the drill. We see the exact same safe, carefully curated sound bites about dreams and unity posted all over social media. But today, we're going to shatter that universally celebrated, non-threatening image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. By exploring Cornel West's compilation of King's most unfiltered writings in The Radical King, we're going to uncover the revolutionary thinker who was actually widely rejected in his own time. We're going to discover a man who challenged the very foundations of American society. Okay, let's dive into this. We all know the sanitized king, right? He's the dreamer, the safe, non-threatening figure whose quotes look absolutely perfect on a bumper sticker. But then there is the historical reality, the radical king. And the sheer irony here is that the man we domesticated into this harmless icon is the exact same man the FBI literally labeled the most dangerous man in America. No joke, he was a democratic socialist who demanded a radical redistribution of wealth and a fierce anti-imperialist who aggressively opposed American foreign policy. Understanding this massive contrast is absolutely crucial. It's the key to everything we'll discuss today. Section 1. Faith and Radical Love, the Foundation of a Revolutionary. So, to truly understand King's radicalism, we first have to understand his core identity. He was fundamentally a revolutionary Christian. His entire political and social ideology was built entirely on a theological concept called radical love. Now, here's the crucial point. Radical love was never some passive, warm, or sentimental feeling. Not at all. Cornel West describes it as a death-in-life conversion. It's characterized by what West calls militant gentleness, which is just a fascinating paradox, right? It also requires a relentless self-examination, where the fearful, egoistic self has to die every single day to be reborn into a courageous, sacrificial self. It was an active, death-defying force. King understood that truly loving his unfree people meant stepping right into the line of fire to demand their liberation, which required immense daily sacrifice. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer fortitude this kind of love required. King once told his staff, "I'd rather be dead than afraid." He saw cowardice and fear in a lot of contemporary leaders who were all too willing to sacrifice unarmed truth just to get access to power and foundation grants. But King? He completely refused to sell his soul. He chose the incredibly dangerous path of speaking the truth, recognizing that his radical love required him to confront the darkness of society head-on, regardless of the personal cost. Section 2. Poverty, Materialism, and Militarism, Confronting the Catastrophes. Because of his radical love, King just could not ignore the systemic failures of the society around him. He actually lamented that his dream of a democratic America had morphed into a nightmare. Cornel West breaks down King's specific critiques into 4 distinct, deeply intertwined catastrophes. King saw militarism as an imperial disaster that was just warping the country's priorities. He saw materialism as a spiritual catastrophe, producing a society of sleepwalkers completely bereft of compassion. Racism was a moral catastrophe, and poverty was an economic one. You see, King wasn't just fighting segregation. He was fighting a deeply interconnected system that prioritized profit and war over human life. Which brings us to a really poignant and honestly heartbreaking question King asked his close friend Harry Belafonte just days before his death. He asked, "Are we integrating into a burning house?" King was profoundly weary of the cultural decay, the political paralysis, and the spiritual catastrophe of capitalism. He really began to question whether merely securing civil rights was enough if the broader American house was literally being consumed by the flames of greed, poverty, and militarism. To put that into perspective, to really highlight how structural this systemic poverty was, consider this number: $20 billion. That was the estimated cost cited by King to provide a guaranteed annual income for all citizens in the U.S. and effectively eradicate poverty. He fiercely contrasted this $20 billion against the $35 billion the nation was eagerly spending on the unjust war in Vietnam. Think about the utter absurdity of that. For King, this proved that the resources to end poverty already existed. The money was there, but the moral will simply did not. Section 3. The Weapon of Nonviolence, a Practical Moral Alternative. Now you might be wondering, is nonviolence just passive submission? When we hear the word, it's easy to picture just taking the hits. But King actually viewed it as a militant, highly structured alternative to systemic violence. Let's walk through his methodology step by step, almost like a tactical playbook. Step 1. It's active spiritual resistance against evil. Step 2. The attack is directed entirely at the forces of evil and unjust structures, never at the individuals caught up in them. Step 3. Accepting unearned suffering as redemptive and transformative. By taking these steps, civil disobedience wasn't about simply enduring injustice. It was a highly disciplined strategy designed to totally disrupt and paralyze unjust systems until change was literally the only option left. King was absolutely unequivocal about the futility of violence. He noted, "Through violence, you may murder a liar, but you can't establish truth." He understood that violence simply breeds more hate and destruction. It just perpetuates this downward spiral. True social change, he argued, requires the massive, disciplined planning of civil disobedience to break that cycle of violence and actually build a genuine community. Section 4, Global Anti-Colonial Solidarity, linking domestic and global liberation. Let's move to and see how this builds. King's vision was never confined to just the borders of the United States. He connected the domestic fight for civil rights directly to global liberation struggles happening across the world in the global South. He drew direct parallels. For example, the Jim Crow segregation in the American South perfectly mirrored the apartheid system in South Africa, which is why King stood in firm solidarity with anti-colonial figures like Nelson Mandela. The economic exploitation of the poor in America, well, that paralleled imperialism in the global South, and the state-sanctioned violence against minorities at home mirrored the violence unleashed by the Vietnam War. King saw the whole shebang as one single global fight for human dignity. And this global perspective led to one of his most controversial moments ever. In his famous 1967 Riverside Church speech, King explicitly called the U.S. government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. Taking this profound anti-imperialist stance caused a massive backlash. And what's kind of shocking to audiences today is just how deeply he was abandoned for taking this position. His approval ratings absolutely plummeted, the establishment turned on him entirely, and even his closest civil rights allies publicly distanced themselves. But King, he refused to segregate his moral concerns. Section 5. Reclaiming a prophetic legacy. Co-optation versus reality. This brings us to how King's legacy is treated in contemporary politics, and Cornel West has a really sharp analysis of this. West points out a phenomenon he calls Santa Clausifying revolutionary figures. Basically, we take historical titans like King and Mandela, we strip away all their radical demands, and we sterilize them. We turn them into these smiling, non-threatening old men perfect for corporate bumper stickers with safe quotes about dreaming and forgiveness. West argues that America does this intentionally to actively evade and avoid the deep, uncomfortable challenge of their actual radical ideas. In fact, Cornel West observes that modern politicians routinely claim King's legacy while actively contradicting his vision. For instance, West sharply criticized the Obama administration, arguing that providing bailouts for Wall Street instead of mortgage relief for the poor, expanding drone strikes, and remaining quiet on mass incarceration are direct betrayals of King's democratic socialist and anti-war platform. West's critique points out how widely the reality of King's platform diverges from the actions of the very institutions that celebrate him symbolically today. It's a really stark contrast when you put them side by side. But King himself actually anticipated this kind of political maneuvering. He maintained a really healthy suspicion of all politicians, regardless of color or party affiliation. He famously stated, "I feel I should serve as a conscience of all the parties and all of the people." King refused to be a mascot for any political establishment. He preferred to operate outside the realm of partisan politics so he could maintain an uncompromising moral clarity. So, what does this all mean for us today? It leaves us with a lingering, fundamental question posed by Cornel West. Does America have the capacity to hear and heed the radical King? Or must America sanitize King in order to evade and avoid his challenge? Are we really willing to confront the revolutionary Christian, the anti-colonial critic, the fierce opponent of poverty and militarism? Or is it simply easier to keep him safely trapped in a dream? I really hope this explainer has given you a fresh perspective on a history you thought you knew and leaves you absolutely hungry to explore the true, radical legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.